The memory of my death was a cold, metallic taste that never truly left my tongue, a phantom pain that lingered in my bones long after I had drawn a new breath. It wasn't just the snake's venom I recalled, but the far more insidious poison of betrayal that followed. In my previous life I was Lien, a village girl whose heart was a naive canvas for foolish dreams. He was Kai, an educated youth from the city, a creature of polished manners and distant allure who had condescended to inhabit our muddy provincial world. I loved him with a desperate one-sided fervor, willfully blind to the disdain in his eyes when they traced the calluses on my hands or the sun-weathered skin of my face. The day the bamboo viper struck him in the cornfield, my world narrowed to a single catastrophic point. Without a second thought, I pushed through the gawking crowd, fell to my knees and pressed my mouth to the festering puncture wounds on his calf. I sucked the vile, blackened poison from his flesh and spat it onto the earth over and over until my mouth was numb, my head spun, and the world tilted on its axis. I saved his life that day, but the venom had seared a secondary path, scouring my vocal cords, stealing my voice forever. Out of a sense of grim duty, or perhaps merely to quiet the relentless village gossip, Kai married the mute butcher's daughter and dragged me back to the city with him. For 3 long years, I lived in the shadow of his simmering resentment, a silent ghost in his home, believing my wordless devotion could someday thaw the perpetual winter in his heart. I didn't know that his heart was already a occupied territory, belonging to another educated youth named Mei Lin. I was just a burden, a living, breathing reminder of a past he was desperate to escape. When I was 10 months pregnant, my body swollen with the fragile hope of a new beginning, he finally showed me the monstrous truth of his character. He laced my dinner with dumb cane. As the violent cramps seized my body and a smothering darkness nibbled at the edges of my vision, he stood over me, his expression as cold and empty as a frozen lake. "Lien," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "This is your fault. If you hadn't insisted on saving me, I never would have been forced to leave Mei Lin. She's carrying my child now. It's time for you to step aside." The pain was sharper than any serpent's tooth, a searing agony that cut through me to my very soul. My child, my precious, unborn child, and I were discarded like yesterday's rubbish. So, it had all been a meticulously maintained lie from the very first moment. When I opened my eyes again, the world was blindingly bright, the air thick with the cloying scent of damp earth and ripening corn. A scream horribly familiar tore through the humid afternoon air, slicing through the lazy buzz of insects. It came from the direction of the educated youth camp. "Leg. Snake. Somebody help." It was Kai's voice. Disorientation washed over me, a dizzying wave that threatened to pull me under, followed by a tidal surge of sheer, unadulterated shock. I was standing on the dirt path leading to the fields, a heavy basket of freshly picked corn digging into my hip. I could feel the rough, worn texture of my cotton trousers, the tickle of sweat trickling down my temple. I was alive. And I could hear. "Lien. Where's Lien?" someone shouted, their voice frayed with panic. "What?" The word left my lips, clear and strong, a sound I had forgotten could be mine. My hands flew to my throat, fingers pressing against the vibration. A sound. I had made a sound. I could speak. The realization detonated within me, a silent explosion that reshaped my entire universe. I had been reborn. I was back at the exact pivotal moment before I had thrown my life away. A fierce, wild joy surged through my veins, so potent it made me lightheaded. I hadn't sucked the venom yet. I hadn't lost my voice. I hadn't been tricked into a marriage that was nothing but a prelude to my murder. I hadn't felt the life drain from me and my child. "Lien, what are you standing there for?" A sharp, impatient voice cut through my reverie. It was Mei Lin, her pretty face pinched with annoyance and a performative concern. "Don't you like Kai? Hurry up and help him." In my past life, those words would have been a command, sending me flying to his side, desperate to prove my worth. Now they felt like a trigger, releasing a cold, hard knot of resolve in my chest. I would not dance to their tune ever again. I slowly walked towards the gathering crowd, my steps measured and deliberate. The villagers parted for me, their faces a gallery of expectation. They were waiting for Lien, the lovesick fool, to perform her greatest act of devotion. I saw him then, just as I remembered, lying pathetically on a pile of rough wheat stalks, his face pale and twisted in a mask of pain. The culprit, a sleek and deadly bamboo viper, was long gone, leaving behind only the damning evidence of 2 puncture marks on his calf. The flesh around them was already swelling, turning an ugly mottled purple, distending against the fabric of his trousers. But even in his agony, his corrosive pride was intact. He gritted his teeth, his eyes, glazed with pain, finding mine with a familiar, withering disdain. "I'm fine. I don't need Lien's help. She's just a butcher's daughter. She's not even qualified to touch me." The words, which had once lacerated my soul, now bounced off a new, hardened exterior. Yes, I was the daughter of a pig butcher. In my past life I had worn that identity like a shameful brand, but it was that very trade that had put food on our table and a fierce, practical strength in my limbs. Kai had always looked down on me for it, and my younger self had foolishly believed that unwavering sacrifice was a currency that could buy his love. Maylin grew more frantic, her performance escalating. "Lien, why are you just standing there? If you don't suck the venom out, he'll die." I looked at her meticulously kept hair and her soft, unworked hands, and a slow, deliberate smile touched my lips. "Maylin," I said, my voice calm and clear, ringing with an authority that silenced the murmurs around us. "Kai is a man. He was bitten on the leg. I'm an unmarried girl. How could I possibly put my mouth on his leg? What would people say? It wouldn't be proper." A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. This was not the meek, eager-to-please Lien they knew. This was someone new. Maylin's face flushed a blotchy, unbecoming red. "Lien, are you seriously thinking about propriety at a time like this? Everyone knows you're crazy about him. You bring him pork every day." "That's right," I admitted openly, another act that widened their eyes in shock. As a butcher's daughter, the one thing we never lacked was pork. I let my gaze sweep over the assembled villagers, meeting their curious stares one by one, before returning my focus to a flustered Maylin. "And yeah, all the pork I gave him might as well have been fed to a dog. I've given up. I don't like Kai anymore." I paused, letting the weight of my declaration settle in the thick air. "If any of you still like him, feel free to suck the venom out yourselves." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by Kai's ragged breathing. He was handsome and educated, and many girls harbored secret fantasies about him. But the bamboo viper was notorious. A bite from it promised a future of rotting flesh, amputation, or a slow, agonizing death. No one was foolish enough to risk their own life for his, except for the past, deluded version of me. As Kai's breathing grew more labored, he began to mumble, his consciousness slipping away. "Lien, help me." I turned to Maylin with a sweet, innocent smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I heard, Maylin, that Kai actually likes you. He even gave you all the pork I brought for him. It seems you two are quite close." Panic, pure and unadulterated, flashed in her eyes. "Lien, don't slander me. I came to the countryside to support rural development, not to get involved with anyone. Even if I ate the pork he gave me, nothing happened between us. We're innocent." "Oh," I said, my tone deliberately light, almost conversational. "Since you ate Kai's pork and now he's in trouble, shouldn't you return the favor? Hurry up and help him. Suck the venom out." I mean, she tangled herself in her own web of words, furious and humiliated. The crowd, sensing weakness and hypocrisy, began to turn on her. "Exactly," an old woman muttered, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Kai's always been so nice to her. Gave her pork, did her chores for her. And now she won't even lift a finger? That's cold." Someone from the back of the crowd, eager to stir the pot, gave Maylin a hard, unexpected shove. She stumbled forward with a sharp cry, landing awkwardly on her knees right next to Kai's grotesquely swollen leg. The sight of the festering wound, the smell of fear and sickness, was too much for her delicate sensibilities. Her face twisted in horror and revulsion, and she retched violently, turning away to vomit onto the dirt. Backed into a corner with no graceful exit, she suddenly clutched her forehead, her voice becoming a dramatic wail. "Oh no. I can't, it's too hot. I have heat stroke. I'm going to faint." And with a final, flawless flourish, she collapsed in a heap on the ground, a perfect picture of fragile feminine incapacity. It was a masterful performance, but it was a performance that cost Kai everything. The village's only tricycle was miles away, delivering goods to town. By the time it returned, the golden hour for treatment had passed. The villagers worked quickly, loading a semi-conscious Kai and a now revived, weeping Mei Lin onto the cart, rushing them towards the distant county hospital. I stood and watched them go, a strange, hollow emptiness where my heart used to be. It wasn't happiness I felt, nor was it guilt. It was the quiet, solemn satisfaction of a cosmic debt being settled by the universe itself, with me as a mere passive witness. I had done nothing but stand my ground, and his fate had already been irrevocably altered. A month later, the news trickled back to the village, carried on the lips of returning travelers. The venom had circulated in Kai's system for too long. The county hospital, poorly equipped, didn't have the specific anti-venom required. To save his life, the doctors had been left with one brutal, definitive option. They amputated his left leg below the knee. Kai, the proud, untouchable city youth, returned to our village a cripple, his body and his pride forever broken. And in that moment, standing on the dusty path and feeling the warm sun on my face, I knew my own path was diverging, stretching out before me towards a horizon I had never dared to envision. A new dream, one I had buried with my voice in another life, began to stir, to unfurl its wings deep within my soul. I was going to Shenzhen. I was going to sing. The first chapter of my revenge was written not in blood, but in silence and inaction, and it was complete. The weeks that followed Kai's amputation were a strange, suspended interlude. The air in the village, once crackling with the high drama of the snake bite, settled into a low, persistent hum of gossip. I was the subject of many whispered conversations, the girl who had refused to save the city boy, the girl who had found her voice only to use it for cold-hearted defiance. I found I didn't care for their opinions anymore. For the first time in either of my lives, I was filled with a profound, unshakable sense of peace. Every morning I woke with the dawn and tested my voice, humming a simple ancient folk tune my mother had taught me when I was small. The sound, clear and resonant in the quiet morning air, was a daily miracle, my personal anthem of freedom. Mei Lin, ever the opportunist, had stayed by Kai's side during his hospital stay. It wasn't born of love, I knew, but of a calculated desire for comfort. Nursing a patient in a clean hospital bed was infinitely preferable to the back-breaking, soul-crushing labor in the cornfields under the relentless sun. She played her part to perfection, the devoted, heartbroken lover, soaking up the sympathy and attention while ensuring her own skin remained pale and unblemished. When Kai was finally discharged and returned to the village, he was a hollowed-out ghost of his former self. He was confined to a makeshift wheelchair, a rickety contraption cobbled together from an old chair and discarded cart wheels. His face was permanently set in a mask of sullen bitterness, and the empty space where his leg should have been was a silent, brutal testament to my deliberate inaction. I felt no guilt, only a cold, distant pity. He had made his choices in one life. I was making mine in this one. It took less than a day for Meilin's paper-thin patience to disintegrate. The very next morning she appeared at my doorstep, pushing Kai's wheelchair before her like a shield. "Lien, you heartless woman," she snapped, her voice shrill with manufactured outrage. "Kai was in the hospital for a month, fighting for his life, and you never once bothered to visit him. What kind of a person are you?" I was outside my family's small mud-brick house, sweeping the hard-packed earth of the courtyard. I didn't stop my work, merely looked up and leaned on the broom handle, regarding her with a calm that seemed to infuriate her further. "Is Kai some kind of national treasure?" I asked, my tone flat. "Why should I have gone to see him? We have no connection." She sputtered, caught off guard by my refusal to engage in her dramatic script. Didn't you used to like him? Everyone knows you were obsessed with him." "I don't care what everyone knows," I said, my voice final. "His leg's injured now and he needs someone to take care of him. The youth camp isn't convenient for a cripple. He should stay at your house. You seem so devoted after all." The audacity of her demand stole my breath away. "What do you think my house is?" I asked, a slow, cold anger beginning to burn in my chest. "A garbage dump?" I let my gaze drop meaningfully to the space beneath his blanket. "Why should I take care of a cripple?" The word, harsh and unadorned, hung in the air between us, sharp and cruel as a shard of glass. Kai, who had been sitting in silent, seething anger, flinched as if I had physically struck him. His hands, resting on the arms of his chair, clenched into white-knuckled fists. "Lien, he shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of pain and fury. How dare you? If you hadn't stood by and done nothing, if you had just helped suck out the venom like you were supposed to, I wouldn't have lost my leg. This is all your fault, you selfish, heartless witch. It was the classic guilt trip, the same emotional manipulation he had wielded so effectively in our past life. Those words would have once shattered me, sent me into a spiral of apologies and self-recrimination, desperate to earn his forgiveness. Now they just sounded pathetic, the desperate flailing of a drowning man. I let out a short, cold snort of derision. Kai, is there some law written in the sky that says I have to save you if you get bitten by a snake? And let's be clear, it wasn't just any snake. It was a venomous bamboo viper. None of the brave villagers dared to help you. Even your dear, delicate Meilin here didn't lift a finger to save you, did she? I shot a pointed look at Meilin, who paled visibly. But even now, hobbled and humiliated, he rushed to defend her. Lien, Meilin is an educated youth, a proper young lady from a good family. Who are you? A rough, unmannered village girl. How can you even compare yourself to her? And for your information, the day I got bitten she was going to help me, but the heat was too much for her constitution. She's delicate. She passed out from heat stroke. It's not her fault. I looked at him, this boy who had once been the sun around which my entire world revolved, and felt nothing but a vast, weary contempt. He was beyond saving, trapped in a prison of his own delusions of superiority and a twisted, self-serving chivalry. Kai, I said, my voice flat and utterly devoid of emotion. You have no money, no prospects, and now you're a cripple. I must have been blind, deaf, and stupid in my past life to ever fall for someone like you. You think you can just move into my house? Dream on. Get lost. I've got real work to do. You're rude and vulgar, he spat, his composure finally shattering completely. How dare a butcher's daughter like you look down on us educated youths? You're nothing. That was it. The final trigger. In my past life, I had been deeply ashamed of my background, of the smell of blood and animals that clung to our home. But now I saw the raw, unvarnished strength in it. My father's trade had given me resilience, practicality, and a familiarity with sharp edges. I rolled up my sleeves, walked calmly into the dark, cool interior of our house, and emerged a moment later with two of my father's sharpest, most well-balanced pig-slaughtering knives. The morning sun glinted menacingly off the polished steel blades. Educated youths are still human, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. But so are butchers. And butchers know how to use their tools. If you push me any further, I'll treat you both like the pigs we slaughter and carve you up right here in this courtyard. The color drained from their faces, leaving them a matching pair of terrified, waxen masks. Meilin let out a little shrill shriek. Lien, you've gone completely crazy. What are you doing? Put those down. Kai, for all his bravado, was utterly terrified. He tried to back his wheelchair up, but its wheels dug into the soft earth, stuck fast. Meilin, in a blind panic, didn't even bother to try and help him. She threw one last terrified glance at the knives in my hands, then turned and fled, her feet kicking up small puffs of dust as she ran without a backward look. Left utterly alone and defenseless, Kai looked from the deadly sharp knives to my utterly serious face, and saw no bluff in my eyes. The raw, primal fear broke him completely. He tumbled out of his chair, landing in an undignified heap on the hard ground. He dropped his head, his body shaking with sobs, his precious pride completely and irrevocably shattered. Lien, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please put the knife down. Don't kill me. I beg you. Watching him grovel in the dirt, reduced to a pathetic weeping mess, was immensely satisfying. It was a dark, vengeful balm spread over the deep, festering wounds of my past life. I slowly lowered the knives, though I did not put them down. Scram, I said, the single word as cold and sharp as the blade in my hand. He didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled, crawling and dragging his body through the dirt, not even bothering with his abandoned wheelchair, desperate to put as much distance as possible between himself and the monster he had created. For a few blessed days there was peace. I helped my mother with the endless chores, I practiced my singing in the deep, secluded woods where no one could hear, and I began to solidify my plans. Shenzhen was no longer just a vague dream, it was a concrete destination. I started to quietly gather information, asking the few villagers who had relatives working in the southern city about train schedules, work permits, and the cost of living. But Kai, it seemed, was not done with me. He came crawling back, his skin thicker than I had ever imagined. This time he had progressed to a crude crutch, carved from a dry tree branch. He stood with as much pride as he could muster in front of our house, a smug, triumphant smile plastered on his face. "Lien," he announced as if presenting a royal decree. "Bet you didn't expect this. The commune and the youth office have reviewed my case and approved my return to the city. I'm going home. Meanwhile, you're stuck here rotting in these backward mountains for the rest of your miserable, insignificant life. Poor thing. You must be so jealous, aren't you?" I looked at him, this broken boy who believed a return to the city was a triumphant victory, even as he returned a shattered man. I felt a wave of pity so strong it was almost nauseating. "Kai," I said, not with anger but with a profound, weary sadness. "You're a pathetic cripple. Let's be honest. You can't carry a bucket of water, you can't run a single step. Even if you stayed here, you'd be a burden, living off the grudging charity of others. Do you really think the commune is letting you go because they value you? No. They're just trying to get rid of you to pass their problem on to the city. And even if you do make it back, how are you going to survive? By sitting on a street corner with a begging bowl." Every word was a needle, meticulously popping the inflated balloon of his ego. His face contorted, a grotesque mask of rage and humiliation, but he was clearly still terrified of my knives, so he swallowed his fury, his Adam's apple bobbing convulsively. "No matter what you say," he clung stubbornly to his last tattered shred of pride, "city folks like us will always be better than you peasants. Once I get back, I'll buy a good job, live in a proper apartment, eat good food, live a life way better than you'll ever know, toiling away in the fields like a beast of burden until you die." I gave him a slow, sarcastic smile. "Oh yeah. And where exactly are you getting the money to buy this wonderful city job? Have you been hiding a fortune I don't know about?" He froze. It was clear he hadn't thought that far ahead. I knew from our past life that his parents were low-level factory workers with no savings, no connections. And now that he was a disabled, disgraced burden, they had likely severed ties completely, not wanting to be dragged down with him. His future was a black, hopeless void, and in that moment he knew it. That's when the real, desperate purpose of his visit became painfully clear. He dropped the smug act and put on a pitiful, wheedling face. "Lien," he began, his voice taking on an unctuous tone. "Your dad's a butcher, right? He must have saved up a good bit of money over the years. I'm willing to be generous here, to give you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you lend me 200 yuan, just a loan, so I can buy a good job and return to the city with my head held high, I'll lower my standards and agree to marry you. I'll reluctantly take you with me so you can become a city wife, leave all this behind. What do you say? It's a fair deal." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it left me speechless for a moment. 200 yuan was a fortune, enough to buy 2 comfortable positions in the city. He wasn't just planning his own return. He was clearly planning to take Mei Lin with him, reinstating their comfortable life on my family's dime. And he expected me to pay for the entire charade in exchange for the privilege of being his lifelong nurse, caretaker, and financial support. A burden to be endured. I was so furious I saw red. I cursed him out on the spot, my voice shaking with rage. "You're a cripple. A useless, broken cripple. And you think you're good enough to marry me? You're lowering your standards? Give me a break. You just want a woman who will pay your way and wait on you hand and foot like a live-in nurse and banker for the rest of your useless life. Dream on, Kai. There's no way in hell I'd ever marry you, not in this life or any other." But this time, to my utter astonishment, he didn't get angry. Instead, he let out a smug, knowing little laugh that chilled my blood to ice. "Lien, marriage isn't decided by the wishes of a foolish girl. It's decided by the parents." His smile was a venomous, triumphant thing. "Your mom and dad have already agreed to marry you off to me. The arrangement is made. Don't believe me? Go home and ask them. You're as good as mine." Clang. The sickle I had been holding, forgotten in my hand, dropped from my numb fingers and hit the hard ground with a dull, final sound. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the colors bleaching away. Oh, it couldn't be true. My own parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, had sold me out to this monster. I ran. My feet pounded against the hard-packed earth, each step a frantic drumbeat of denial. The familiar courtyard of my home, usually a place of weary resignation, now loomed like the gates of a prison. My mother was there as always, her back bent over a tub of washing, her movements slow and heavy with a lifetime of fatigue. "Ma." The word tore from my throat, raw and desperate. I skidded to a halt before her, my chest heaving. "Is it true? Did you and Pa agree to marry me off to Kai?" Her hands stilled in the soapy water. She didn't look at me, her gaze fixed on some distant, painful point only she could see. Her silence was a confirmation more damning than any shout. From the dark doorway of our house my father stumbled out. The sharp, sour smell of cheap baijiu preceded him. His eyes were bloodshot, his face a blotchy red. "You ungrateful girl," he roared, his words slurring into one another. "I've spent half my life slaughtering pigs, my hands steeped in blood, and this is my retribution. Stuck with a worthless daughter. No son, no legacy. Now finally a city youth, a cripple yes but a city man, is willing to take you off my hands. You should be on your knees with gratitude. Who else would have you? Tell me that. Who else would take a butcher's daughter, an old maid, besides a broken city boy?" Each word was a lash, reopening old wounds. Yes, I was a butcher's daughter. I was in my 20s, an old maid by the village's narrow standards. My parents' shame over my unmarried status was a constant, heavy presence in our home, a blanket of disappointment that smothered every conversation. And Kai, the cunning serpent, had slithered right into that vulnerability. He had painted a picture for them, their daughter a city wife, themselves the respected in-laws of an urbanite. He'd even had the audacity to demand a 200 yuan dowry for the privilege, and my father, in his desperate drunken thirst for a sliver of respectability, had agreed. My mother, her spirit crushed by decades under my father's fists and fury, had no voice. She could only look at me, her eyes pools of silent, helpless pleading. When the full, ugly truth was laid bare, I began to tremble. But it wasn't with fear. It was with a rage so pure, so incandescent. It felt like a cleansing fire burning through the last vestiges of my old, submissive self. For the first time in either of my lives, I stood my ground against my father. "I don't care what promises you made," I said, my voice shaking but clear, cutting through the alcoholic haze surrounding him. "I will never marry Kai. He is a liar and a scumbag. He will use me and discard me. He will ruin me." My father's face turned a terrifying shade of purple. The veins in his neck bulged. Instead of coming for me, he turned on my mother, the easier target. He lashed out with a vicious kick, catching her squarely in the stomach. "You raised this worthless girl," he bellowed as she crumpled to the ground with a choked cry. "This creature who eats my food, lives under my roof, and dares to talk back to me. Fine. I'll deal with both of you right now." He raised a meaty fist and charged at me. But I was ready. The confrontation with Kai had been a lesson in the language of power, and I had been studying hard. 4 days I had been quietly sharpening my father's butchering blades, feeling their deadly balance, preparing for a moment like this. I didn't flinch. I didn't run. I turned, and in 2 swift strides, I grabbed the heavy, well-worn cleaver from the chopping block near the kitchen door. As my father lunged, I didn't aim for him. Not yet. I brought the cleaver down on the old, scarred wooden kitchen table with a deafening thwack. Splinters flew. I hacked at it again and again, my arms powered by a fury born of 2 lifetimes of oppression. The sound was monstrous, a violent percussion that echoed through the courtyard. My father froze mid-step, his drunken bravado evaporating into stunned, sober terror. In the sudden silence, I turned and closed the distance between us. I held the cold, sharp edge of the cleaver right against his neck. The steel kissed his skin. He gasped, his eyes wide with a shock so profound it seemed to sober him instantly. "You bastard," I growled, my voice a low, deadly whisper. "Lay one more finger on me or my ma and I'll kill you. I swear it. I don't care if I die too. We'll go down together." He never expected this. The daughter he had bullied and belittled her entire life was now holding a blade used to dismember pigs to his throat, and her eyes held no fear, only a cold, fearless certainty that promised she would follow through. His body began to tremble uncontrollably. "You crazy girl," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You've gone mad. I'm your father. You dare raise a knife to me?" I stared at him, unblinking, my grip firm on the cleaver's handle. "You get drunk and you beat your wife and your daughter. You have never been a father to me. You're a bully. And what I am doing right now counts as self-defense. If you don't believe me, go ahead." Hit me. Let's see what's stronger, your drunken fists or my butcher's knife. My mother, clutching her stomach, was terrified. But after a second's hesitation she scrambled to her feet and threw herself between us, shielding me with her body. Please don't hit her anymore, she begged, sobbing. If you beat her to death we'll truly have no one left. We'll have nothing. Then she turned to me, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Leon, please put the knife down. He's still your father no matter what. Please. She was trying to give him a way out, to de-escalate the situation before it ended in bloodshed. He seized the chance, hurriedly pulling back and muttering empty threats under his breath. Ungrateful brat. Oh, I'll let you off this time. For your mother's sake. But if you ever dare talk back to me again I'll beat you to death. With that he turned and bolted out of the courtyard like a rat fleeing a sinking ship, terrified I would change my mind and hack him to pieces. In that moment as I watched him run, I realized something profound and life-altering. If I stood up and fought back, if I showed no fear, even the most brutal abusers could be reduced to cowards. They weren't invincible titans. They feared pain, they feared blades, they feared losing their pathetic dominion just like anyone else. But once he was gone, the adrenaline faded and my mother began sobbing quietly, her entire body shaking. I thought she was afraid of his return, of the retribution to come. Ma, I said, my voice softening as I finally lowered the cleaver. I went to her, putting an arm around her trembling shoulders. Next time he lays a hand on you, you fight back. You don't have to take it. Go to the commune. Report him. Let the whole village know what he is. He's scared of losing face. He doesn't want people pointing fingers behind his back. But my mom just shook her head, her tears falling onto the dusty ground. It's been over 20 years, Lien. I've gritted my teeth and gotten through it all. I've endured. What else can I do? Then she said something that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. Lien, your dad has a hard life too. My health was never good. I couldn't give him a son and people mocked him for that, called him a failure. He needed to let it out somehow. I'm his wife. It's my duty to bear it. My chest ached with a pain so sharp it stole my breath. Why, Ma? I protested, my own tears starting again. Why should having a daughter be a reason for shame? That's not fair. It's not right. Girls can carry on the family too. We deserve a future of our own, a life we choose. But she didn't agree. She didn't even seem to hear me. Instead, she wiped her eyes on her sleeve and went into their room. She returned a moment later, holding a cloth bundle. With trembling hands, she unwrapped it. Inside was a stack of banknotes. The 200 yuan. The blood money meant to buy my way into a life of servitude. She tried to reason with me, her voice pleading. Lien, don't worry about what other people say. Look. She pressed the money into my hands. Your father was willing to hand over his life savings, everything we have, to Kai so he could take you to the city. That proves he values you. He wants a better life for you. I stared at the cash, feeling its weight, the weight of my father's ambition and my mother's misguided hope. He doesn't value me, Ma, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He values the idea of being a city father-in-law. He doesn't care what happens to me as long as he can boast about it to his drinking buddies. But my mom didn't understand. She kept trying to speak up for Kai, to sell me on the fantasy. Lien, I think Ethan's actually pretty decent. I mean, sure, he's got a bad leg now, but he's still educated. When he came to propose, he was so polite. He said he's always liked you deep down. He promised he'd take good care of you once you moved to the city. You'd have an easier life. That hypocrite. The words were like acid. But I couldn't blame my mother. She hadn't lived through the nightmare I had. She wasn't the one who had been betrayed and murdered in a past life. She had no idea what kind of monster Kai truly was. Still staring at the cash in my hands, a plan began to form, a desperate, audacious plan. Ma, I asked, forcing my voice to be calm. Do you know what year it is now? It's 1984, she said, puzzled. The news said they've started issuing national ID cards across the country, from cities to villages. Why? It matters a lot, I said, my heart beginning to race, a spark of hope igniting in the darkness. With an ID card I can travel. Legally. I can go far away. I can go to Shenzhen to find work. Real work. Her eyes widened in horror. Go to Shenzhen? Are you out of your mind? You're a girl. A girl's place is here, getting married and having children, taking care of her family. Running off to work in a strange, big city. That's a man's job. It's too dangerous. I shook my head, clutching her hands, the money pressed between our palms. Ma, Shenzhen is a special economic zone. They're building it from the ground up. There are factories everywhere and they need workers, thousands of them. They don't care if you're a man or a woman. I can start working on an assembly line. The pay is good. Once I've saved up enough, I'll buy a little house in the city. Proper home. And I'll bring you there to live with me. You'll never have to be afraid again. But she refused to budge. The walls of tradition and fear were too high. No, Lian. Absolutely not. Shenzhen is full of dangerous people, cheats and criminals. What if someone kidnaps you? What if you get lost? What would I do then? I'd die of worry. No matter what I said, no matter how I painted the picture of opportunity, she wouldn't listen. The desperation of 2 lifetimes welled up inside me, a torrent that could no longer be contained. I broke down completely, great heaving sobs racking my body. Ma, I cried, my voice cracking with the weight of my truth. Do you really want me to marry Kai? Do you want to sign my death warrant? He doesn't love me. He looks down on me. He's been involved with Maylin this whole time. One day he's going to throw me away or worse. He'll ruin me just like Pa has ruined you. Is that what you want for your daughter? A life of misery and betrayal. She looked stunned as if I'd slapped her. That can't be true, she stammered. Kai always seemed so polite, so well-mannered. Ma, I said, my voice dropping to a raw, painful whisper. A man's mouth is full of lies when he wants something. The more he fakes it before marriage, the more he'll take it out on you afterward. I looked at her with pleading, desperate eyes. Ma, before you married Pa, when he came to propose, didn't he seem honest? Didn't he seem respectful? But what happened after you married him? What has your life been? My mom fell silent. The truth of my words, the undeniable evidence of her own suffering, hit her with the force of a physical blow. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw a crack in the wall of her resignation. She didn't sleep at all that night. I could hear her restless movements from the other room. The next morning, while my father was out at the commune, she came to me. Her face was pale and etched with new lines of worry, but her eyes held a flicker of resolve. She quietly slipped the bundle of 200 yuan into my hands. Her own hands were trembling. Lian, she whispered, her voice barely audible, filled with a nervous fear. Are you really going to Shenzhen? Are there really that many big factories there? Will you be safe? I hugged her tightly, my own tears flowing freely now, tears of relief and a crushing love. Don't worry, Ma. The county TV station's been reporting on it non-stop. They say the streets there are lined with gold for those who are willing to work. I pulled back and looked into her eyes. As soon as my ID card is ready, I'll leave. That very night. The battle for my future was won. But the war for my departure, I knew, was just about to begin. The days while I waited for my ID card were a lesson in suspended animation. I moved through my chores like an automaton, my mind 1,000 miles away amidst the neon and noise of Shenzhen. My father, still smarting from the Cleaver incident, maintained a sullen, simmering silence, but I could feel the heat of his resentment like a physical pressure. The air in our home was thick with unspoken threats, a pot waiting to boil over. Meanwhile, Kai, emboldened by my father's promise, became a permanent, pathetic fixture in the village's gossip mill. He hobbled around on his crutch, bragging to anyone who would listen, and many who wouldn't, that I was so desperate for a city husband that I was paying him to take me. The narrative he spun was one of my utter devotion. I was offering myself and my dowry without even the dignity of a bride price. He even had the gall to expect me to fund not just his own return to urban glory, but Maylin's as well, casually mentioning that I would, of course, be purchasing their train tickets. This news acted like a miracle tonic on Maylin. The moment she heard Kai had secured her passage back to civilization and the promise of a city job, she slithered back to his side, her previous heat stroke and abandonment conveniently forgotten. Their reconciliation was a public spectacle of nauseating hypocrisy. There they were, Kai with his crippled leg and Maylin, clinging to his arm as if he were a conquering hero, openly resuming their clandestine meetings in the cornfields as if the amputation and the betrayal had never happened. They were a pair of actors in a deluded play, and they made a point of performing their scenes of reunited happiness right in front of me, their captive audience of one. Lian, Kai smirked one afternoon, cornering me by the village well. You got all 3 train tickets ready, right? Mine, Mayleen's, and yours. Don't screw this up. He said it like he was doing me a favor by allowing me to bankroll his escape. I clenched my fists behind my back, my nails digging half-moons into my palms. I forced a bland, subservient smile onto my face. What he didn't know was the beautiful, cruel symmetry of my plan. Out of those 3 tickets, only one was real. The one-way ticket to Shenzhen, purchased with a portion of the dowry money, tucked safely in my inner pocket. The other 2 were expired scraps I'd picked up from the gutter near the county bus station, worthless placeholders for a train that would never come for them. Don't worry, I said, my voice sweet as poisoned honey. I've got all 3 tickets. The train to North City leaves the day after tomorrow. But my parents. I let my gaze drop, playing the part of the obedient, mistrustful village girl to perfection. They're afraid you'll trick me. They said I should hold on to the tickets until the very day we board. Kai rolled his eyes, a gesture of supreme urban condescension. Your whole family's so narrow-minded. It's embarrassing. Then he turned to Maylin, his voice dripping with a fake tenderness that turned my stomach. Even though my leg's bad now, I've got money. I'll buy us good teaching jobs once we're back. We'll both become college professors. Even with one leg, I'll make sure you live a good life. He then looked back at me, his lip curling in a sneer. As for Lien, even if she clings to me all the way to the city, at most she'll be a nanny for our household. She'll never affect your status, my love. Maylin was visibly moved by this grand, delusional declaration. Oh Kai, you're so good to me, she simpered, tears glistening in her eyes. I love you. I've always loved your soul, not your body. Even if you're crippled, I'll never leave you. Right there in broad daylight, they embraced, a pair of tragic lovers in their own pathetic drama. I nearly gagged. It was so transparent. Kai, since losing his leg, had become bitter, irritable, and entitled. This deep love was a performance for an audience of 2. And Maylin, who claimed such devotion, was only enduring his bitterness for the train ticket and the phantom job. A morbid curiosity took root in me. What would happen to their great love when they discovered there were no tickets, no jobs, and no future? Finally, the day of departure arrived. The morning was crisp, the sky a pale, washed-out blue. My parents, a study in contrasts, accompanied the 3 of us to the county train station on a borrowed tricycle. My mother's face was a mask of quiet anxiety, her hands clutching a small bundle of food she'd prepared for me. My father wore a strange, puffed-up expression, already mentally polishing his new title, father-in-law of a city man. Kai and Maylin were practically vibrating with ill-concealed excitement. On the crowded, chaotic platform, they stood watching the bustling trains and the well-dressed city folk with wide, hungry eyes. They were so lost in their fantasy of urban bliss they didn't even glance properly at the tickets I handed them. The crisp, valid one for me, the 2 crumpled, obviously dated ones for them. They clutched them like golden talismans, their tickets to a better life. The moment of truth arrived with a screech of brakes and a blast of steam. My train to Shenzhen was announced. I hoisted my single, worn suitcase. Where are you going? Kai asked, confused as I moved decisively toward the correct platform. Lien, didn't you attend that literacy class? Can't you even read? That's the train to Shenzhen, not North City, you idiot. But the conductor had already checked my ticket. I climbed the metal steps, the sound firm and final beneath my feet. I found my hard seat by the window and rolled it down, leaning out to look at them through the grimy glass. They stood on the platform, 2 stunned statues amidst the flowing river of passengers, their mouths agape. Kai, I said, my voice calm and clear, carrying over the station's din, I didn't get on the wrong train. My ticket is for Shenzhen. I let a slow, cold smile touch my lips, a smile meant only for them. You 2 should have looked more closely at your tickets. Are you sure they're even real? Kai froze, the color draining from his face. Maylin, with a panicked gasp, scrambled to inspect hers. What? How could this happen? She shrieked, holding up the worthless paper for all to see. These are expired. The date is from last week. That's right, I said, my voice flat. Their tickets were for North City, but the printed dates were from a week ago. I bought them from a shady scalper. Completely invalid. I didn't bother feigning innocence now. Let them see the truth in my eyes. The color returned to Kai's face in a rush of humiliated, blotchy red. Lian, what the hell is this? He shouted, his voice cracking with a fury so pure it seemed to vibrate in the air. You tricked us. You planned this. His outburst drew the attention of passers-by and a stern-looking station officer who began moving toward us. Instantly, I rearranged my features into a mask of flustered, innocent apology. I was a country girl after all. Easily duped. Oh no. I cried, my voice pitched to Carrie, layering it with a convincing tremor. It's my fault. I must have gotten scammed by that ticket seller. He swore to me they were valid for North City. He seemed so honest. I had no idea they were expired. I'm so sorry. I looked from the officer to the growing crowd, playing the part of the victim perfectly. It was a masterful performance. The crowd's sympathy visibly shifted to me, the poor, naive girl cheated by a city slicker. But the reality was a cold, hard wall. Invalid tickets were useless. All the real tickets to North City were long sold out. And even if there were seats available, Kai and Meilin didn't have a single spare yuan between them. Their dream of a triumphant return to the city evaporated in the sooty, acrid air of the station, leaving behind the bitter ashes of reality. Meilin looked like she might actually faint from sheer, incandescent rage. I don't believe this. We were supposed to go back today. You did this on purpose. Kai, his pride in tatters, whirled on my father, his last desperate hope. You two old fools. What the hell is wrong with you? Didn't we agree? I take your daughter to the city and in return you pay for our tickets and give us the 200 yuan dowry. This was the deal. My dad panicked, seeing his coveted status and his money disappearing before his eyes. He jabbed a thick, accusing finger at me through the train window, his face purpling. You ungrateful brat. How dare you play games with me? Why the hell are you going to Shenzhen? And where's my money? Hand it over to Ethan. No. I still plan on becoming a city father-in-law. In the face of my father's roaring anger and Kai's sputtering, impotent rage, my mother, for the first time in her life, did not shrink back. She did not cower. She stood her ground, her slight frame seeming to grow taller, her spine straightening from its perpetual slump. The anxiety on her face melted away, replaced by a fierce, protective resolve that I had never seen before. That 200 yuan, she said, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength with each word, cutting cleanly through my father's tirade, was mine. I earned it with every meal I cooked, every piece of clothing I washed, every blow I endured. I gave it to my daughter. She turned her gaze to Kai and it was like a physical blow so full of contempt it made him take a step back. Kai, a shameless, lazy bum like you isn't good enough to lick my daughter's shoes. You will never have her and you will never have our money. My father went berserk. The betrayal from his meek, submissive wife was the final, unforgivable straw. With a guttural, inarticulate roar of pure fury, he pulled an empty glass bottle from his coat and hurled it with all his might at my mother's head. You traitorous woman. You two bitches teamed up to scam me. I'll kill you both. Ma, watch out. I screamed, pure terror for her freezing the blood in my veins. Of everyone and everything I was leaving behind, she was the only one I couldn't bear to lose, the only one who made my resolve waver. At that moment she glanced back at me. And I saw it. A shift, a sudden ferocious courage born from a mother's love, a fear not for herself but only of worrying me, her departing daughter. Then without a second's hesitation as the bottle shattered on the ground beside her, she didn't flinch away. She bent down, grabbed a long, wicked-looking shard of the broken glass, and as my father lunged for her, she slashed it toward his neck. He screamed, a high-pitched sound of pain and utter shock, stumbling backward. He had dodged on pure instinct. The glass didn't slice his throat, but it gouged two deep, bleeding furrows across his cheek, marking him horribly, a visible scar of his defeat. It was the first time she had ever fought back. The sight of his meek, broken wife, armed and dangerous, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen, terrified him more than any butcher's cleaver ever could. It shattered the fundamental order of his world. You crazy bitch, he howled, clutching his bleeding face. A woman's husband is her god. You dare attack me? Your master. But his voice trembled. His precious, brutal masculinity had been fatally wounded. The next moment it was over. The station police, alerted by the commotion, moved in swiftly. They restrained my flailing, screaming father, starting a public scene, causing a disturbance, assault. One of them listed mechanically. Any one of those charges was enough to land him in a cell. I was crying, so scared for her, my face pressed against the cool glass of the train window. Just then the train whistle blew, a long, mournful and impatient sound. The great engine shuddered and began to pull forward with a great exhalation of steam and a grinding of metal on metal. "Stop the train! Stop!" Kai shouted in panic, realizing the finality of what was happening, that his last hope was literally rolling away from him. "If that brat runs off, we'll have no money to get back to the city." In that moment of chaos, I looked at my mother's face, streaked with tears and splattered with my father's blood, and I wavered. The guilt and fear were overwhelming. I couldn't leave her to face this alone. My heart breaking, I made to move toward the emergency exit. "Ma, I'm not going," I cried out, my voice thick with tears. "I'll stay home. I'll stay and protect you." But as I started to rise from my seat, my mother did the most astonishing, the most courageous thing I have ever witnessed. She pushed past the confused policeman and my stunned, bleeding father, ran alongside the slowly moving train, and reached up, firmly pushing me back into the carriage through the open window. "No, my girl," she shouted, her voice strong and clear over the growing chug of the engine, a voice I didn't know she possessed. "Once work begins, there's no turning back. Go to Shenzhen. Fight for your future. Build a good life." Her face, a mixture of utter despair and fierce determination, was the most beautiful, heart-wrenching thing I had ever seen. "I'll always be waiting for you back home. Now go." The train picked up speed, the wheels finding their rhythm. I collapsed into my seat, sobbing uncontrollably, my vision blurred by tears. Her figure grew smaller and smaller on the receding platform, but her face, in that final, powerful moment, was carved into my heart, etched so deep it would be unforgettable, a permanent source of strength. "Take care, Mom," I whispered into the glass, my breath fogging the pain. And just like that I was gone. The city, the future rushing toward me. The past, with all its pain and its one beautiful, redemptive act of love, falling away behind. The journey to Shenzhen was a blur of clattering tracks and a churning mind, a whirlwind of grief, guilt, and a terrifying, exhilarating freedom. I later learned from letters my mother managed to send, penned by a literate neighbor, that on the day I left, my father was arrested for causing a public disturbance and assault. He was jailed for 3 months. 3 months of socialist discipline and police education, she wrote, had broken him. He returned to the village a meek, diminished man, his spirit crushed. After that, even the act of slaughtering a pig made him tremble. My mother, for the first time in her adult life, enjoyed a stretch of peace, a silence unbroken by threats or violence. As for Kai and Mei Lin, with no money and no valid tickets, their grand return to the city was impossible. Defeated and utterly humiliated, they had no choice but to crawl back to the village, their tails between their legs. But their reputation was in tatters. They were pariahs, reviled by everyone, objects of scorn and mockery. The commune wanted nothing to do with useless, problematic city youth who were more trouble than they were worth. Even their own families in the city, hearing of the disgrace and the disability, had formally cut ties, not wanting to be burdened with their failure. They were trapped, their futures as barren and lifeless as a salted field. While their lives stagnated in a mire of bitterness and mutual resentment, my new life was just beginning. I arrived in Shenzhen, a city that roared with an energy so palpable it felt like a living entity. Skyscrapers were skeletal giants against the hazy sky, the constant din of construction was the city's heartbeat, and the streets teemed with people from every corner of China, all chasing the same frantic dream of prosperity. I quickly found work in a massive electronics factory, a sprawling complex that hummed day and night. My job was on the assembly line, twisting tiny screws onto circuit boards for pagers and mobile phones for 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. The work was monotonous, mind-numbing, the air thick with the smell of solder and plastic. The factory dormitory, though cramped and shared with 7 other girls, was cleaner and brighter than my home in the village. The cafeteria meals always had a piece of meat or fish, a luxury I had never known consistently. But the novelty soon wore off. The work was brutally repetitive, the city vast and intimidatingly lonely. I was just a number, a pair of hands. No matter how fast I twisted those screws, setting my station on fire with speed, I could never afford the very products I was building. I sent most of my paycheck back to my mother, leaving me with just a few dozen yuan for myself. The dream of buying a city home, of bringing my mother here, felt more distant than ever, a cruel joke played by a merciless city. To cope with the soul-crushing loneliness and the aching homesickness for my mother, I returned to my oldest, most faithful comfort: singing. I would sing the folk songs of my homeland softly to myself in the dormitory after lights out, or hum melodies under my breath while my hands worked automatically on the line. One day, a coworker in the bunk below me overheard me. "Lien," she said, her voice filled with genuine surprise. "Your voice, it's beautiful. Like a nightingale's. I've never heard anything like it." Word spread. Soon, whenever the factory held a talent show or a cultural performance for the workers, I was the first one asked to sing. The stage fright I'd never had a chance to feel in my previous life was replaced by a thrilling electric joy when I stood before my fellow migrants. The applause, their cheers and shouts of support, fed a tiny, fragile flame of confidence I never knew I possessed. For a few minutes, I wasn't just factory worker number 407. I was Lien, the girl who could sing. It was this small, fledgling fame that eventually caught the attention of the factory's management. One day, my line supervisor called me into his cramped, paper-strewn office. "Lien," he said not unkindly, "your voice is too good to be wasted on the assembly line. We're drowning in worker turnover and morale is low. We need something to make people want to stay. We're moving you to the publicity department. You'll help with the factory newsletter, organize events, and sing. Your salary will double." It was my first real break, a trembling step onto the path I was always meant to walk. I had navigated the first treacherous currents of this new world. I had a future, a trade that didn't involve blood or betrayal. And I was just getting started. The publicity department was a different universe. Gone was the relentless, deafening hum of machinery and the acrid smell of solder. Instead, my days were filled with the soft scratch of pen on paper, the gentle whir of a mimeograph machine, and the warm, woody scent of the old desk I was assigned. My primary duty was to write uplifting articles for the factory newsletter, the electronic spark, chronicling worker achievements and management's latest benevolent policies. But my real value, I quickly learned, was my voice. My new salary felt like a king's ransom. The first thing I did after ensuring a larger money order was sent to my mother was to visit a bustling night market. There, amidst the chaotic symphony of haggling and sizzling walks, I found my treasure: a second-hand tape recorder, its buttons worn smooth by previous owners, and a stack of bootlegged cassette tapes. They were a jumble of genres: soaring cantopop ballads from Hong Kong, revolutionary anthems from a bygone era, and the simple, heartfelt folk songs of my own region. Every spare moment was now consumed by music. I would sit on my bunk after my roommates had fallen asleep, headphones clamped over my ears, listening, repeating, practicing. I dissected the vocal runs of the pop stars, the powerful projection of the revolutionary singers, and I wove them into the raw, emotional core of the folk melodies I had known since childhood. My voice, once a tool for survival in the fields, was becoming an instrument. My coworkers in the publicity department, a mix of other slightly more educated migrant workers and a few actual city locals, became my first fiercely loyal fans. "Lien, you sound better than the singers on the radio," the office assistant, a bubbly girl from Hunan, would exclaim. "When you sing that song about the mountain stream, it makes me homesick, but in a good way." Their belief was a tangible thing, a shield against the lingering whispers of imposter syndrome that told me I was just a country girl playing dress-up. Then the opportunity fell from the sky, a gift from the heavens themselves. My department head, Mr. Wong, burst into the office one afternoon, waving a brightly colored flyer like a victory banner. "Listen up. The city is hosting its first ever Shenzhen Youth Singing Contest. To celebrate our city's spirit. It's open to everyone. Migrant workers, locals, anyone with a valid ID card. No restrictions." His eyes landed squarely on me. "Lien, you have to enter. This is it." A collective excitement buzzed through the room. My colleagues surrounded my desk, their faces alight with possibility. "This is your chance. You'll win for sure. We'll all come to cheer for you. We'll make banners." In that moment, looking at their eager, supportive faces, my eyes filled with tears. The books were right. Opportunity did, in fact, favor the prepared. And I had been preparing for this my whole life, across 2 lifetimes. The mute girl and the murdered woman were both cheering me on from the shadows of my soul. The competition was a whirlwind that swept me off my feet. The preliminary round was held in our district's community hall. I stood backstage, clutching the microphone, my heart hammering not with fear but with a fierce, defiant joy. I wore a simple blue cheapao I had saved for months to buy, my only concession to stage glamour. When I walked out, I could see the judges' dismissive glances. Just another factory girl. Then I opened my mouth and sang. I chose a folk song, one my mother used to hum while mending clothes, a song about a bird leaving its nest, longing for the sky but always remembering the branch that raised it. I poured every ounce of my journey into it. The pain of betrayal, the terror of my father, the heartbreak of leaving my mother, the loneliness of the factory, and the burning, unquenchable hope for tomorrow. My voice, forged in the open air of the mountains, had a power and a raw, aching authenticity that the polished, conservatory-trained singers lacked. I saw the surprise on the judges' faces, the slight parting of lips, the nodding of heads. I sailed through that round and the next. By the time I reached the citywide finals, the local media had caught the scent of a good story. A reporter from the Shenzhen Daily interviewed me backstage. The Nightingale from the assembly line, the headline read the next day. The narrative was irresistible. The butcher's daughter from a remote village who became a factory worker and was now a singing sensation, her voice a symbol of Shenzhen's own meteoric rise from farmland to metropolis. The night of the finals was to be broadcast live on Shenzhen television. The venue was a proper theater with plush red seats and a stage that seemed as vast as a field. The lights were blinding. Peering through the curtain, I could see the audience, a sea of expectant faces. Kai, my father, the village that thought it knew my destiny, they were all a world away, insignificant specks in the rearview mirror of my life. On that stage, under the blazing lights, I was no one's daughter, no one's victim. I was just Lien. I was the last to perform. When my name was called, I walked out to a polite smattering of applause. I had chosen my song carefully. It was the same mountain folk song from the preliminaries, but I had refined it, added a more complex arrangement provided by a friendly pianist I'd met during rehearsals. I closed my eyes for a brief second, thought of my mother's face on the platform and began to sing. I didn't just sing the notes, I told a story. The melody soared and dipped, my voice trembling with the vulnerability of the bird leaving its nest, then swelling with the determination of its flight. When I hit the final sustained note, a high, clear tone that seemed to hang in the air long after I had stopped singing, the theater was utterly silent for a heartbeat that stretched into an eternity. Then the silence shattered. The auditorium erupted. People were on their feet, cheering, whistling, stamping their feet. I saw judges smiling, people in the front row openly wiping tears from their eyes. I stood there, breathless, taking it in, this wave of acceptance and admiration that washed over me, cleansing me of the last residues of shame. The rest was a beautiful, dizzying dream. I won first prize. The mayor himself handed me a large, ornate trophy and a certificate. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust in my face. Overnight, my life transformed once again. I was a local celebrity. The factory gates were besieged by fans and other reporters asking for interviews and autographs. But they were too late. I had already given my notice. A small but ambitious independent record label, New China Sounds, impressed by my story and the unique quality of my voice, had offered me a professional contract. I sat in their sleek modern office, a world away from the mud brick house of my childhood, and I signed my name, Lien, on the dotted line. My hand was steady. For the first time, I was not the subject of a transaction arranged by others. I was the one deciding my own worth. 3 months of intensive training followed. It was a boot camp for the soul. Vocal coaches worked to expand my range and protect my instrument without sanding away its rustic edges. A stern woman taught me stage presence. How to walk, how to hold the microphone, how to connect with an audience beyond the raw emotion I naturally projected. The label's director said, "We don't want to make you into a city girl. We want to polish the gem you already are. Your authenticity is your brand." We settled on a sound that blended contemporary pop production with the folk influences of my roots, a fusion that was both modern and timeless. My first album was self-titled, simply Lien. I wanted the world to remember that name. The girl who refused to be silenced. The album cover was a striking black and white photograph of my face, my eyes looking directly, fearlessly into the camera, a simple silver necklace at my throat. The album, released with a modest but clever marketing push centered around my Nightingale story, took off in a way no one, least of all me, had expected. It resonated deeply with a nation in flux. It sold over 500,000 copies in the first month, a figure that put me on par with established pop stars. My face smiled down from billboards advertising the album. My songs, Mountain Stream, The Train South, My Mother's Hands, played in hair salons, department stores, and taxi cabs across the city. Through it all, I never forgot who I was or where I came from. I turned down lucrative endorsements for luxury cosmetics and foreign liquor that felt false to my story. Instead, I became a familiar face at charity concerts. I performed in school auditoriums for wide-eyed children, and in the canteens of other massive factories, looking into the eyes of young migrant workers who saw their own dreams and struggles reflected in mine. I was their proof that the script could be rewritten, that the assembly line did not have to be the end of the story. I wasn't just a singer, I was a symbol of possibility. For 5 years I worked with a relentless, grateful energy. I released 6 more albums, each one cementing my place in the industry. I won awards, Best New Artist, Best Female Vocalist. I gave televised interviews where I spoke candidly about my past, not with bitterness, but as a testament to how far one could come. I traveled the country performing in grand concert halls. I had money. I had fame. I had a power and an independence that was entirely my own creation. The ghost of the mute, murdered wife from my past life was finally, completely laid to rest. And then, with a career established and a heart full of a peace I had never known, it was time to go home. Not as a fugitive but as a conqueror. I returned to my rural hometown during Chinese New Year, not as the disgraced daughter who had fled in the night, but as a national star. The county government, hearing of my impending arrival, decided to make a spectacle of it. From the county seat to our commune and all the surrounding villages, the road was lined with colorful flags that fluttered in the brittle winter air. As the hired car, a sleek, black sedan that drew stares from every corner, pulled into the village, drums beat and gongs sounded, a cacophony of celebration that felt both thrilling and surreal. The entire countryside seemed to have turned out, a sea of curious, excited faces pressed against the car windows. The mountain nightingale had returned, and everyone wanted a glimpse of the legend she had become. But the only face I searched for, the only one that truly mattered, was my mother's. I found her standing at the edge of the crowd in our village square, looking older, her hair more gray, her frame a little frilier, but with a new, unshakable light in her eyes that made my heart clench. The moment she saw me step out of the car, she didn't wait. She rushed forward, pushing through the well-wishers and threw her arms around me, holding me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. She sobbed into my shoulder, great, heaving sobs that spoke of 5 long years of pent-up worry, loneliness, and a pride so immense it could only be expressed through tears. "Ma, I'm home," I whispered, my own tears flowing freely, soaking into the rough fabric of her coat. The scent of her, of home-cooked food and sun-dried laundry, was a balm I hadn't known I needed. When we finally pulled apart, I held her at arm's length, my hands on her shoulders. "Ma," I asked gently, the old, familiar fear resurfacing despite my success. "After I left, did he ever hit you again?" My mother's expression changed. The softness of our reunion hardened into something else. She glanced sharply over her shoulder at my father, who was hovering nervously a few feet away, wringing a worn cap in his hands. She scoffed, a short, derisive sound I had never heard her make before. "That old loser?" she said, her voice loud and clear, carrying to those nearby. "He got what was coming to him. A pig he was slaughtering 2 years ago spooked, rammed him into a post. Hurt his spine. Now he can barely get himself into bed at night, needs help with the chamber pot." She looked back at me, a hard, satisfied glint in her eye that was both shocking and glorious to see. "You think he still dares to raise a hand to me? I'm the one who should be beating him for all those years." My father, hearing this, seemed to shrink inside his padded jacket. He took a trembling, hesitant step forward, his eyes downcast, not meeting mine. "Lien," he mumbled, his voice a pale whisper of its former roar. I'm sorry. It was all my fault. I shouldn't have treated you and your mother that way. I was wrong. A stupid, stubborn old man. Please forgive me." I swear I'll never do it again. The economic base, I thought with a grim sense of vindication, indeed determines the superstructure. With no physical strength to intimidate, no money for drink, and no legacy to boast of, his power had evaporated completely. He was now entirely dependent on the wife he had once terrorized, living in constant cowering fear that she might finally divorce him and leave him to die alone, sick and destitute. The revolution in my household, begun with a cleaver and a shard of glass, was now complete. To give back to the people who had once watched my struggles with pity or scorn, I decided to hold a free concert at the village entrance. A makeshift stage was erected using borrowed lumber and colorful quilts, and a sound system was trucked in from the county town. It felt surreal, performing my professionally produced pop songs for the familiar weathered faces of my past, the very cornfields that had witnessed my rebirth serving as my backdrop. But what I never in 1,000 years expected was to run into Kai again right here on this day of my absolute triumph. I was in a temporary tent having my makeup done by a stylist I'd brought from the city, when a commotion broke out outside. It was a voice, ragged and desperate, cutting through the festive noise. "Let me through. My name is Kai. I really am Lian's ex-boyfriend. I swear I'm not lying. Please just let me see her. She's beautiful and kind. She'll definitely remember me. She'll help me." The response was a chorus of merciless, raucous laughter from the villagers guarding the entrance. "Ha! Lian's a famous pop star now. Why would she know a crippled loser like you?" "Exactly. I'd sooner believe pigs can climb trees than believe she ever looked at you." A cold, detached curiosity prompted me to action. I had to see it. I had to see the final pathetic footnote to my old life. I stepped out of the tent, escorted by my manager and a broad-shouldered bodyguard. I had to see just how far the mighty had fallen. The man I saw shocked me to my core. Leaning on a crude, twisted crutch made from a dry tree branch was a wraith. His hair was a shocking, premature white, a filthy nest around a face that was a roadmap of deep wrinkles and grime. His clothes were little more than rags hanging off a skeletal frame. He smelled, even from a distance, of unwashed flesh and despair. He looked decades older than his years. This hollowed-out, broken shell was the handsome, proud youth I had once loved and lost everything for. Someone from the village committee, seeing me, hurried over, his face a mask of apologetic embarrassment. "Miss Lian, please pay this no mind. This person is the former educated youth Kai. He and that Maylin woman were a disgrace. Lazy, immoral. Their records were a mess of disciplinary violations. The city didn't want them back. Their own families, ashamed, disowned them completely. They lost their chance forever." He went on to detail their sordid end, speaking quietly but with clear disgust. Unable to earn work points, they had starved. Desperate, Maylin had seduced a crude tractor driver from a neighboring commune, gotten pregnant, and married him in a rushed, shameful ceremony. But her life was one of endless humiliation, looked down upon by her new in-laws for her capitalist background and her illegitimate child, her husband openly cheating on her. As for him, the official said, nodding with contempt at the pitiful figure of Kai, after Maylin left him for the tractor driver, he had no one. A cripple with no skills and a rotten reputation. He turned to stealing eggs from hen houses, vegetables from the gardens of the elderly. He's been in and out of the county jail so many times he probably has his own cell. The more he went in, the more despised he became by even the other criminals. He came out, like this. He's a ghost. Hearing this clinical dissection of his ruin, I felt a strange emptiness. Not satisfaction, not even pity. Just a profound, ironic sense of closure. I hadn't needed to lift a finger in direct vengeance. Karma had been a far more efficient, patient, and cruel executioner than I could ever have been. But Kai, seeing me emerge, mistook my stillness, my silent observation, for sympathy. He seemed to take it as an invitation, a crack in the door. He broke past the security, stumbling and falling to the frozen ground at my feet, clutching at the hem of my expensive wool coat with grimy fingers. "Lian, I knew it. I knew you were my first love. I knew you never forgot about me," he babbled, his voice a broken, wheedling whine. "Lian, just a few days ago I had a dream. A vivid dream. I dreamed that in a past life I got bitten by that snake and you were the one who saved me. You sucked the poison out and saved my life. In that dream we went back to the city together and lived out our days as a loving, happy couple. It was real, Lian, I know it was. The mention of the dream, the unvarnished truth of my past life, shattered my detached calm. A wave of pure, unadulterated revulsion washed over me, so strong it was nauseating. He remembered. He remembered the life where he had used me, betrayed me, murdered me and our child, and he had the gall to romanticize it, to use our tragic history as a tool for his own salvation. He was a cockroach, scuttling through the ruins of multiple lives. I couldn't hold back anymore. I felt sick, swarmed by an invisible filth. Utterly revolted, I kicked his crutch hard, sending it clattering away across the hard ground. Bastard! I snarled, my voice low and venomous, meant for his ears only. So, you do remember what happened in the dream, huh? Then you should also remember how you ruined me in that past life. You took my voice, my life, you poisoned me and killed our child. You don't even have the guts to admit the truth, and you think you're worthy of my love? You are less than nothing. He lost his balance completely and collapsed into a heap, crying out in genuine pain. But even lying in the dirt, he kept begging, his voice a broken, pathetic whimper. Lian, I was wrong in the dream too. I hurt you. I know I did. Please just look at me. See how I've suffered. Give me one more chance. I swear I'll make it all up to you. I'll love you the right way this time, I promise. But I didn't give him another chance. Not anymore. I didn't need to. I had money. I had fame. I had a power that was entirely my own. I didn't need to seek validation from the ghosts of my past, nor did I need to deliver their final sentence. I simply turned my back. I didn't even need to speak. The public security officers who had been waiting nearby for just such a disruption moved in and efficiently dragged the sobbing, pathetic figure away. I didn't look back. I walked onto the makeshift stage, the adoration of the crowd washing over me like a warm, cleansing wave. I looked out at the sea of faces, at my beaming, proud mother standing front and center, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep into my bones, that the girl who had died in that other life was finally, truly, forever free. The song I sang that day was not one of vengeance, but of a hard-won, glorious, and everlasting peace. The roar of the village crowd was a physical thing, a wave of sound that washed over the makeshift stage and soaked into the very soil of my hometown. I stood there, bathed in its warmth, and for a fleeting moment, the past and present superimposed. I saw the ghost of the mute, grateful girl I had been, standing in this same dirt, and I saw the woman I was now, a woman who commanded attention with her voice, not sacrificed it. My final song was a new one, an unreleased ballad I'd written in my Shenzhen apartment, looking out at a sea of lights that had once been just a dream. It was called The Soil and the Sky, a tribute to the roots that grounded me and the wings that set me free. As I sang the last note, holding it until it faded into the crisp mountain air, the silence that followed was profound, broken only by the wind whispering through the bare winter branches. Then the applause erupted again, louder, warmer, more real than any I'd received in a city stadium. It was the sound of home accepting me not as I was but as I had become. Later, as the stage was being dismantled and the crowds began to disperse, laden with the thrill of the unexpected concert, I found myself surrounded by a different kind of audience. The village elders, their faces etched with the seasons, the women I'd once worked alongside in the fields, their hands still rough from labor, even the children who only knew me as a face on a poster or a voice on the radio. They didn't ask for autographs. They pressed small, hard-won gifts into my hands. A basket of brown eggs, a jar of thick, golden wild honey, a clumsily knitted scarf in vibrant, clashing colors. Their pride was a tangible force, not for the star I'd become, but for the local girl who had made good. I was their victory too, a proof that this place, these mountains, could produce something that shone on a national stage. My mother stood by my side through it all, her hand occasionally finding mine, giving it a squeeze that was both a comfort and an anchor. Each touch felt like she was tethering me, reminding me that despite the fame and the distance, this dusty village, with all its painful memories, was still a part of my marrow. We walked back to the house, now quiet and still, the echoes of the celebration fading behind us. The next few days were a quiet whirlwind of visits and reminiscing. I walked the familiar paths, some now paved with rough concrete, and visited the old educated youth camp, which was mostly derelict, its windows broken, a ghost of a bygone era. I stood at the edge of the cornfield, now fallow and dusted with a light snow, where it had all begun. The memory of Kai's scream, the sight of his swelling leg, the pressure of countless expectant eyes. It all felt like a scene from a film I'd watched long ago, poignant but no longer painful. The landscape of my past had lost its power to wound me. One afternoon I took a long walk with my mother, away from the well-wishers and the lingering officials. We ended up on a small hill overlooking the village, the same hill I'd fled to as a child to escape my father's temper. The view was the same, but the eyes seeing it were irrevocably changed. "He asks about you, you know," she said softly, not looking at me, her gaze fixed on the smoke rising from the village chimneys. "Your father. He collects every newspaper clipping about you he can get his hands on. He keeps them in a wooden box under his bed. Sometimes I see him looking at them when he thinks no one is watching." I didn't say anything. The wound of his betrayal was too old to ache, but the scar was still there, a pale, raised reminder. "He's not the same man, Lien," she continued, her voice firm. "The illness, the shame, it broke him. But in some ways it saved me. I have a life now. I have friends. I play mahjong with the other women on the street. I don't have to ask for money to buy a new pot or a bolt of cloth." She said this not with bitterness, but with a quiet, firm satisfaction that was more powerful than any shout of victory. I looked at her, truly looked at her. The perpetual worry line between her brows had softened. Her shoulders, once permanently hunched as if awaiting a blow, were straight. The journey I had taken to Shenzhen had, in its own way, been her journey to freedom as well. My escape had been the key that unlocked her cage. "I'm glad, Ma," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. The cycle of pain that had trapped her for decades had been broken, not by a man's change of heart, but by a seismic shift in power, enabled by my defiant flight. My manager had booked my return ticket to Shenzhen for a week later, but I found myself extending my stay. The frantic, relentless pace of the city, the constant demands of recording schedules, promotional tours, and media appearances, felt a world away. Here I could breathe. I spent my days helping my mother in her small, meticulously kept vegetable garden behind the house, a task I'd once resented but now found deeply, soothingly therapeutic. We talked for hours, sitting on low stools in the weak winter sun, filling in the gaps of the 5 years we'd spent apart. I told her about the soul-crushing loneliness of the factory dormitory, the sheer terror and exhilaration of the singing contest, the surreal experience of seeing my own face 20 feet tall on a billboard. She told me about the small, monumental triumphs of her new life, standing up to a bullying neighbor who had always taken advantage of her, painstakingly learning to read well enough to understand my letters without help, secretly saving a little money of her own in a tin hidden beneath the floorboard. It was during one of these quiet, sun-drenched afternoons that a young girl, no older than 12, appeared at our gate, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Her name was Xia, she whispered, the daughter of the village tailor. She had a voice, she said, and she dreamed of singing just like me. Would I please listen? So, right there in my mother's dusty courtyard, with the chickens clucking softly in the background and the winter sun casting long shadows, I listened as Xia sang a local folk song. Her voice was high and clear as a bell, trembling with a fear I knew so well, but underneath it was a raw, untrained potential that was unmistakable. It was the echo of my own voice from a lifetime ago. I didn't offer her empty promises of fame and fortune. Instead, I talked to her about scales, about breath control, about supporting a note from the diaphragm. I told her that a voice was like a muscle. It needed constant, careful practice and unwavering care. I wrote down the name and address of a reputable, kind-hearted music teacher in the county seat, a former opera performer who had retired back to her hometown. And I promised Xia and her wide-eyed, disbelieving parents who had gathered nervously by the gate, that I would pay for her first full year of lessons. The look on her face, a dizzying mixture of shock, disbelief, and dawning radiant hope, was worth more than any platinum record, any industry award. It was the circle of hope completing itself. As my departure date finally loomed, a profound sense of completion settled over me. This trip home had not been about gloating or revenge. It had been about reconciliation, with my past, with my mother, and with the girl I used to be. I had closed the circle not with a slam but with a gentle, definitive click. On my last morning, my mother walked me to the same dusty spot where the tricycle had picked me up 5 years before. This time there was a hired car waiting, its engine purring softly, ready to take me to the airport and back to my life. There were no tears this time, Only a deep, quiet, unshakable understanding that flowed between us, a river of shared strength. You built your good life, Lien, she said, reaching up to cup my face in her work-roughened hands, her touch infinitely gentle. Just like you said you would. You told me you would and you did. And I'll build one for you too, Ma, I said, my voice thick with emotion. A real house in Shenzhen. With running water and a flush toilet. Just you wait. She smiled then, a real, full, breathtaking smile that reached the corners of her eyes and lit up her entire face. I'm already living in it, my girl, she said, her voice steady and sure. She tapped a finger gently against her chest, over her heart. Right here. Knowing you're out there, free and happy, singing your songs. That is the biggest, most beautiful house you could ever build for me. I hugged her then, pulling her small, sturdy frame against me, breathing in the familiar, essential scent of sun-dried cotton and earth. The scent of home, of love, of survival. As the car pulled away, I watched her in the rearview mirror. She was not a shrinking figure this time, but a strong, upright woman standing proudly in the middle of the road, one hand raised in a steady, unwavering wave, watching until the car turned a corner and she was gone from sight. The flight back to Shenzhen was smooth, the sky a boundless, brilliant blue. I looked down at the sprawling, glittering city that had become my home, its relentless energy visible even from thousands of feet in the air. It was a city of dreams and I had carved out my own piece of it, not with a cleaver but with a song. But I knew now, with a certainty that filled me with a profound peace, that my story was no longer just about escaping a village or a tragic past. It was about what you build after you've escaped. It was about using your voice once you found it to sing songs that matter, songs of survival, of strength, of a mother's love, and of a peace so hard-won it feels like a constant, quiet miracle. I had my next album to record, new stages to conquer, new songs waiting to be born. But for the first time the drive felt different. It wasn't fueled by the fire of past wrongs or the fear of returning to poverty. It was fueled by the steady, warm, enduring light of a future I had chosen, built and cherished entirely for myself. The encore, I realized with a smile as the plane began its descent, was just beginning. The end,